Yeah, so I've cut the front of this video off here with Piers Morgan interviewing these three young people, and I'll just say that this is covered under the fair use clause for education and entertainment purposes with my subscribers, and the bit I cut off was just Piers Morgan here talking about his interviews with Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson. So let's get into it.
Well, clips of both of those interviews have exploded online. Literally millions of people have been viewing them. Jordan Peterson, for example, the whole interview has been viewed 5.5 million times on our YouTube channels, rightly or wrongly. There's clearly a huge groundswell of interest, at the very least, in their views, if not support. So was MeToo an overdue reckoning, or has it become a damaging battle in a raging culture war? Isabel's still with me, plus political journalist Ava Santino, conservative commentator, a young man who agrees with Peterson and Andrew Tate, Connor Thomason. Connor, welcome to the show. Let me start with you. I found it very interesting interviewing Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate, both very controversial characters in different ways.
Right, so this term controversial. So Piers Morgan here is a mainstream media reject, I guess. I guess he got, I think he got fired from his position on the morning show or some morning show somewhere in the UK. And this term controversial is a mainstream media term for the right wing, basically, for anything that's not Marxist in ideology. So what's funny about this is Jordan Peterson's not political. He's a clinical psychologist, and so he comes at everything, I think, from that angle. Andrew Tate, I don't know too much about. I understand he was toxic misogynist, which probably meant that he's just speaking the truth, and the left didn't want to hear it. So educate yourselves on the term controversial whenever you hear it in the media. It's not about it's to do with the narrative being questioned. That's what the media at large find controversial, is that when their narrative is questioned, and when that happens, that's a controversial thing. And by labeling it controversial, they can put it on the other, put it out, and they can carry on with their narrative. That it can be dismissed because it's controversial. We don't want controversy in our lives, etc., etc. So that's one of those little buzzwords to watch out for.
Both positioned as a kind of kings of toxic masculinity. I certainly didn't think Jordan Peterson was that. And when it came to Andrew Tate, I couldn't really conclude after 90 minutes of grilling him. I gave him quite a hard time. I couldn't really conclude what he had done that was so bad that he had to be expunged from social media life altogether. But it showed me the sensitivity around all this. And if any man now behaves in a way that looks like it's toxic masculinity, bang, they're expunged. Is in that process masculinity itself getting expunged and demonized?
Yeah, look, I'm just going to interrupt Connor here for a second. Here's Piers Morgan saying, if anything that can be construed, basically anything that can be construed as toxic masculinity should be expunged. Now, my issue here is that term toxic masculinity is actually applied to masculinity overall. Like there are no traits, masculine traits these days, that are not toxic. So the only traits that are acceptable in men are feminine traits. Anything that could be at all interpreted as being masculine is now toxic, and therefore forbidden. It needs to be expunged, as Piers is saying. So that's my contention here with Piers, is that he's using this term in the wrong context. The toxic masculinity has broadened. We'll see this again later on with the term sexual assault. It's so nebulous now and so all-pervasive that it is about any man saying anything that is not firmly in the feminine or feminist narrative that is therefore toxic and therefore cannot be tolerated. And it began with the terms like mansplaining, for example, which became the Oxford Dictionary's word of the year. And this is where it's gained traction, you see, through the mainstream. And we are where we are today. So
I would say so. I mean, I'm sure that you'll have this experience with your own relationships, Piers, in that women, if you say something controversial, whether it's something on the Peterson side of the spectrum or on the Tate side of the spectrum, a little bit more explosive or a little bit more academic, some women are very much drawn to a man who can be a bit more confrontational, say exactly what he thinks. It's the verbal new version of what Gladiators used to do in the arena way back.
Well, certainly I think Ava and Isabel are laughing because they know that they're drawn to me in that way because of my combative nature. But Ava, you're smirking and laughing. I mean, there's a serious point here. A lot of young men feel they're getting disenfranchised by society. They're all being over-demonised, that any attempt to be the traditional male figure is now being rubbished and called toxic.
Well, I mean, if you really felt that and you really went out there and you were an alpha male, then you wouldn't be bothered about a bunch of women telling you that you were...
Well, you would if you get cancelled, like Andrew Tate, if you get banned from
I mean,
every
he's
social
hardly
media
been cancelled. He was on your programme, which is on national television.
But
so
it's the only platform,
a
actually, he's had for a long time because all the social media companies banned him, literally banned him. He had his email gone, his Google gone, his Facebook gone. It all went down like dominoes.
Well, he's still on there, very, very prolific on there. I can't move for clips of him.
Yeah, but they're
on
not generated by him now.
Well, but that's been for quite some time.
But should he be punished that way?
But what is punished?
So I don't know this woman, Ava, someone or other. Obviously a feminist. She is a classic example of why you do not entertain the thought of discussing anything of any substance with women. Right, this is the classic example where she will gaslight on every topic, on every point that you make. She will gaslight. What is punishment? What a fucking load of shit that is, you know. And she will never be wrong. She will duck and weave and dodge, and never be never. I mean, you'll pin her down, but she won't accept it. She won't acknowledge that she's made a mistake. This is a classic example of why women should not be taken seriously and should never be spoken to or with about anything of any substance. This is the absolute classic example of it, and they're everywhere. These women, everywhere. This is a cat lady in the making. Believe me.
What is punish?
Punish is where companies take a decision which, in my view, in this case, was perverse because they still allow, for example, the Ayatollah of Iran to have a Twitter account.
Yes.
So there's no consistency here at all.
Well, but however, we love a bit of free market. I'm sure you do, judging by that suit, which is lovely.
Yeah. Here she is showing her true class. So I suspect that's an attempt at feminist humour, just casual male bashing, a casual put down of the nearest man, just for entertainment's sake, and obviously an ad hominem attack straight out of the gate, trying to gain some sort of high ground in the debate, probably, or at least score a point against the men, and again, nothing of any substance really to say, and looking like the arsehole that she obviously is, in my opinion.
But, you know, social media companies are private companies.
You're not
they can do whatever they can do
I'll
whatever
take all the
they like.
objectification I like.
Of course you will, yeah. All right, Isabel.
But Ava, your point about, you know, if men were that alpha, then they wouldn't be that bothered by this, doesn't really help us when it comes to boys growing up. And that is one of my worries, that for teenage boys now, they are so terrified of the consequences of putting a foot out of line. It's hard enough being a young teenager, working out how things are, working out how to do dating and all of that, without the terror that if you touch in the wrong place at the wrong time, you may find that your whole life is destroyed.
See, I
and there
like
is
that
far
terror.
too much. Well,
I like that.
As a
I
mother
think
of
that
a
men
teenage
should be
boy, I
frightened.
don't like
Really?
that
That's
terror.
the most
I do.
malicious thing I've ever heard.
That is
I
awful.
think that men should be frightened
I think
to
you'd
touch
feel
women in a way
differently
that
if you
they're
were-
not
if you
comfortable
were-
with.
Yeah, I really don't know what to say about that. She thinks that men should be terrified. Now, this is the power dynamic that the feminists are talking about here. If you ever hear a feminist talk about equality, it's gaslighting. So what you've got here is your typical modern day feminist who believes that the destruction of a man's life, a young man's future, is in any way equatable with a woman feeling uncomfortable in any form of discomfort for a woman warrants the destruction of a man, preferably in the extreme. Take it to the extreme. The extreme feminists want to be able to shoot men with impunity for making them feel uncomfortable. I'm not sure Ava's in that camp just yet, Ava the arsehole, but she is probably heading that way. But yeah, she believes terrified young boys is a good thing. These are the young boys who are going to invent the sex robots. And, you know, that's what men do, adapt and overcome. So.
But we're talking about
Yeah, but we're not talking about. We're not talking about.
We're talking
yeah, but
about
it's an
young
interesting
children.
thing that you see. I would say that attitude actually is part of the problem too. That is that's to me toxic femininity.
It is.
That is saying you should all be terrified, you men, if you put one.
Of assaulting.
Well, I think we all understand what sexual
What is
assault
an
is.
assault?
What Isabel's talking about is that young teenage clumsiness
really
in many
hard.
cases, which is now being recategorised as assault. Is that a problem?
It's not being recategorised as assault. It's always been assault. It's just we're finally talking about it.
I don't agree with that.
So here's the classic feminist tactic on display. Now, first of all, let's just look at what Piers has said here with toxic femininity. Now, so this is not toxic femininity at all. Ava here is not displaying any femininity whatsoever. She's displaying masculine characteristics. There's nothing feminine about this young woman at all. So Piers has got it wrong there. It's toxic feminism that is what's on display here. Now, of course, as soon as you start questioning a feminist about anything that she said, she will immediately shift the goalposts. And this is what you see here. Suddenly we're talking about sexual assault. The woman beside her has just said, look, you know, why should a young teenage boy be terrified of touching a young teenage girl in any way? And suddenly we've gone from a couple of teenagers fumbling around in the dark in the back seat of a car at the drive-in to sexual assault. Two completely different things, of course, and actual sexual assault is nothing like a woman feeling uncomfortable or a boy feeling anxious and uncomfortable while they're learning the birds and the bees, so to speak. So this is another example, another clear example of why women should never be talk to about anything to do with these matters. And, you know, men, go your own way. Just look, you don't, this sort of topic, this sort of conversation doesn't need to happen in the East. It just, you don't get these conversations in the East, because women understand masculinity and men understand femininity, and it's a everything that is difficult in the West is easy in the East. So men, get your passport and come and have a look for yourselves. Don't take my word for it.
It's ridiculous.
Teenage boy fumbling with teenage girl is not in most cases assault, is it?
Do you remember Aziz Ansari, right? Half the heels of MeToo, half the heels of Harvey Weinstein rightly being dragged through the courts, and it should have got way worse than just prison time, in my opinion. Aziz Ansari had a consensual relationship with a woman. She felt a bit awkward, and afterwards rescinded consent, and he was lumped in, and he had his career.
No, I'm with you on that one.
Cancelled.
I'm with
so
you.
Then why should men be afraid of that?
Because he didn't touch her without consent, did he?
No, but she rescinded his consent, and she saw that.
How are young boys supposed to navigate this, the whole thing? I'm thinking of my teenage son. You know, he's 14, 15. What's he supposed to say? Would you mind if I put
Isabel,
my
you are an
hand,
extremely strong woman. I know in your house you're teaching them the difference between assault and then coming on to someone. I know you are.
But what we're talking about is, it's been very interesting watching the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement, how it's all developed. Because a lot of very bad people, Harvey Weinstein and others, got their due comeuppance. We can all agree with that.
Yeah.
This is not even something to be debated. We're really talking about the grey line, right? Where is that grey line?
Yeah.
How do you navigate it? When you're an experienced adult and you've been around the block in many ways, you can navigate that much more intelligently and with emotional intelligence than you can if you're a teenage boy. And I think the point Isabel makes is a good one. I've had 3 sons in their 20s. I've always taught them to be respectful to women, and I believe they are. But I do think it's really hard for a 16, 17-year-old boy now in this environment to know even how to start
they are all
having
terrified.
some kind of physical relationship with a woman.
Those good boys are all terrified. I know that from talking to my son. He's just like, I'm just not going there. Is that healthy?
So, again, with the sexual assault, the idea that a mother is going to teach her son the difference between foreplay and sexual assault, it's ridiculous. Okay, it's not going to happen. Boys won't discuss that topic with their mothers. Don't be frickin' stupid. All right, it's fathers that teach their sons this kind of stuff. So this is why we're in this situation, because you've got all these fatherless homes. So it's just ridiculous what this woman is saying, is Ava the arsehole. So what's not being discussed here is the right to a fair trial, the right to the presumption of innocence in every aspect of Western law. That's the foundation of all of it, is this presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And that right has been taken away from all of the men all over the world with this hashtag MeToo movement and the Believe All Women and all the rest of that crap. So that's obviously not of concern. Like, they're talking like they're concerned about the male world, the manosphere, so to speak. Piers is coming at this from a male perspective, and yet he's missing this entire issue with hashtag MeToo, and that is that men's rights have been lost, and women, of course, still have that right, presumption of innocence. They've always had that right. That's given to them just by virtue of their gender, and it's promoted, the hashtag Believe All Women. Why should we? So, and the young man says, consent has been rescinded after the fact, and the man's life's destroyed. So, again, presumption of innocence, consent at the time, it's just, like I say, the West is broken. None of that is relevant to the East. This is becoming more and more evident to me on a daily basis. All of this stuff with the transgenders and It's just not an issue in the East where I am. There's none of it is of any concern at the moment in Thailand.
Yes, I think it is actually. I think it's better to not have a physical relationship than to have one that could ruin a woman's life.
But then how do they ever start?
Well, don't. If you're not 100% sure, don't.
What are you going to have? A bunch of neutered boys who never had...
So obvious.
We actually do have that. Gen Z is having far less sexual relationships than any ever
they
before.
are, it's true.
And
young people have stopped having sex.
I agree with the first part of your sentence, actually. If you're not willing to have a sexual relationship with clearly defined lines, don't have one. And so I actually told my mates at university, don't sleep around with girls. 1, girls don't bring a guy home that you don't know what he's capable of. 2, guys, don't bring a girl home if you think that possibly she could have a false accusation against you.
Can I make another point here?
Which I find, I mean, look, that sentence to me, when I was your age, right? How old are you?
23.
23. When I was your age, the idea you would even have that sort of thought process.
Yeah, I wouldn't have those sort of mates that would ever cross the line, so I wouldn't have to have that conversation with any of my friends.
Don't throw my mates in with a bunch of violent people.
And is there a certain...
So here's Ava the arsehole again. I wouldn't have mates like that. No one will have anyone like you, Ava. Okay. Yeah, the guy's 23, and my advice to the 23-year-old men is go east. Like, just get out and get away from all of it, because he's saying don't take a woman home that you think could possibly make a false allegation. If a young man gets into a private situation with a woman, right, and I'm talking no witnesses, okay, and that could just be walking down the fucking street, okay, she can then make an allegation where it's her word against his, and her word will be believed over his. And that's where you're at as a young man today. The truth is irrelevant. It's what she can pin on him, and it's the destruction of the young man's future in many cases. So I see Ava finds this hilarious. She's laughing away there that she's causing some men some discomfort. It's all a big game to her, and I mean, this is why you just don't take them seriously at all. The young women today, not worth having a discussion with.
Certain purity here I'm detecting in a certain type of feminist who thinks that they're all unimpeachable and that this is all one-way traffic and that only men can be toxic.
No,
because I've got to enlighten you. I've met quite a few women in my life who are pretty toxic themselves, and I don't see the debate being framed around that at all.
No, but the point is that we're still in a situation where only 5% of rape cases actually even go to trial.
Which is ridiculous.
But that's
right.
Yeah, so this is again a classic example here. Piers says, we're not bringing into the picture the toxic femininity. He says is the toxic women. We're framing all this whole thing about men being the perpetrator, women the victim. Whereas there's it's a dynamic. There's arsehole women. Here's one here, and her immediate comeback is, yeah, but we're in only 5% of rape cases go to trial. Shifting the goalpost, right? Exactly what that is. That is now the whole topic has shifted from, and we've gone and it's escalated. Okay, so we've gone from talking about teenagers fumbling and sexual assault now to, well, we can't question women because only 5% of rape cases go to trial. Now, again, this is a major assumption on the fact on Ava's part here that a rape has actually occurred in 95% of the cases that didn't go to trial, because believe me, the judicial system, the police system is set up so that if there's the slightest possibility of getting a man convicted of rape, he will go to trial, right? Not so much for the women who rape the school children, the underage boys. That tends not to go to trial. That can easily be plea bargained away in most cases in the States. And the media will frame it as a love affair between a school teacher who couldn't help but fall in love with this young boy of 15, 16 years old. You know, so this whole thing is about shifting the goalpost away from what is actually relevant to something that's completely irrelevant, off topic, and is not worthy of discussion, because rape is not tolerated in any Western society at all. So, by men and women, right? So this whole narrative that Ava is pushing, and she claims not to be a feminist, by the way. I mean, she's everything that she said is feminist 101. So, just she's a gaslighting asshole, is what this woman is, and should never be on this panel, should never have been taken seriously at all. And I don't know why there aren't more women decrying what she said, because it besmirches every woman's character. Make no mistake about it.
Extreme end of it, isn't it? You're talking about rape here.
But David, we can all agree that's wrong. We can all agree that's wrong.
But okay, so even on the extreme end of it, rape doesn't even go to trial. If you're assaulted, and that is life-changing.
Yeah.
What happened to Rose McGowan with Harvey Weinstein?
I know Rose well.
Was
but these are
life-changing,
extreme
and
things.
she didn't get her comeuppance.
Yeah, but
She
Ava, we'd
lost
all
her
agree about
career.
that. Well, I think what has sent a shudder through all of our spines from your mouth today is the line that all young men should be terrified of any physical contact.
Someone.
Well, no, you didn't say it like that. You said basically of starting any physical contact with a
Unless
woman.
you're sure.
Well, how does a 16-17-year-old boy
Sure,
know?
when she can rescind consent on something completely nebulous.
Okay, can I ask you this? If you were going to take someone to bed and you weren't 100% sure that they wanted to go to bed with you, would you go with them?
No, I would not do that.
Then
But
that's
the point
what I'm
was,
talking
Aziz
about.
And that's why she should not be taken seriously, because first of all, it's not what she's talking about at all. You know, what she's just said there is not what she's talking about, and she's said before that she's talking about sexual assault when, in fact, when she first said boys should be terrified just because of the hashtag MeToo, it wasn't got nothing to do with this. She didn't mention assault back then at the start of this interview or this discussion. So she's not talking about this at all. This is what she's now trying to gain some kind of moral ground or some kind of solid ground that she can argue from, because so far she's shifted the goalposts continuously and has actually not contributed to the conversation one iota. So this is why these women shouldn't be taken seriously. So the point that she claims to be making now, that you shouldn't be taking a woman to bed unless you're 100% sure, that is just unattainable bullshit. That no one, like, the women always want plausible deniability in everything they do. So that's female nature. That's what they want. So the double entendre, the mixed signals, all of it is about the play between men and women. It's about the seduction. I mean, what Ava here is saying is that, you know, essentially you need the lawyers, the young boy and the young girl's lawyers, to draw up some kind of agreement that they can both sign as they're sitting on their respective side of the bed, is what this idiot is essentially saying when she's saying 100% certain of anything. So, you know, it's absolute bullshit what's coming out of this woman's mouth, and she should be called out for it. This Piers is not doing his job here. He needs to stomp on this fucking bitch and put her in her place and stop this ridiculous narrative that's destroying the fucking Western world. Because it's irrelevant. All of this, living here in the East, you can see the absolute irrelevance of this entire narrative. It is completely ridiculous that this is being discussed with what is going on in the world today. You know, you're on the brink of fucking nuclear war, for Christ's sakes, and here's an idiot talking about whether or not boys and girls should be 100% certain whether or not they're going to have sex. It is absolutely fucking ridiculous.
Sorry with Shaw, for example, and then later she went and published a long piece about how she regretted it and lumped him in with Harvey Weinstein.
I mean,
is that okay?
Ava,
do you feel any of it, Ava's gone too far? Do you think the pendulum has gone too far at all?
No, I don't think it's gone far enough, actually.
Really?
I don't think we've brought anything into schools. To your point, we haven't brought any teaching into school about what is assault, what isn't. If you're worried about, like, 16-year-old boys not understanding what it is, bring in sexual health lessons.
Hang on.
Yeah. So here she is changing the goalposts again, or shifting the goalposts again. So 16-year-old boys know what sexual assault is. Okay. A lot of them have been assaulted themselves, okay, in that way. So this idea that it's all the boys' fault, again, blame the men, and they just need to be educated, you see. So we just need to bring it into school and teach it as sexual health, you see. So this is muddying the waters again, and she's equating rape and sexual assault with sexual health education. I mean, she literally has no idea what she's talking about, and is not capable of having an open and frank discussion about any of these topics, because she is, although she claims not to be in a few seconds, she is a feminist, without a doubt. So let's carry on.
The idea that you can teach rapists not to rape is insane, because they already know.
What do you mean?
That it's illegal. Okay, right. You're saying if boys wouldn't know what's assault and what isn't.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. The idea that rather than taking the power out of someone who can make a false accusation is what they're actually, most of them are concerned about. Specifically, my friends, for example, who would never dream of doing something like that. But then what the feminists fail to understand is you can educate evils. Did you not identify yourself as a feminist study?
No, I didn't, actually.
Oh, okay,
Piers
sorry.
did.
Piers
You're not a
did, so
feminist?
then that's...
But Piers labelled me.
Actually, I called you
Okay.
a toxic feminist.
Okay, then if that's my
I'll take that.
That's
Yeah,
wrong.
go on.
Fair enough. But you cannot, if a rapist is willing to violate the law so violently, you cannot teach him out of that. All you can have is very harsh punishments to deter
No, because
that.
you're talking about the grey line, and the grey line is at parties of not understanding that when a woman is so inebriated that she can't stand up, boys need to understand that is
Well,
no.
that's a different
No,
line.
you're
That's a completely
bringing in
different
something else. Ava, I would like...
So again, arsehole Ava here. You know, we're talking about a grey line. It's not a fucking grey line. Okay. We're talking about teaching rapists not to rape. Is what you've just said. That you need to have sexual assault education at school, and the young man's countered that by saying that is a ridiculous idea. And now you're a drunken girl at a party. I mean, Ava here is someone who, like I've said, it cannot be taken seriously. Like the women around the world need to be jumping on this girl and telling her what you're saying is trash. Stop it. But of course she's lauded because she's got the buzzwords and the talking points that fit the narrative, that male perpetrator, female victim, boys just need to be taught not to rape, boys are evil, toxic masculinity, blah 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 blah, and that's the narrative. She's got the buzzwords and she's able to get a platform, and so she's away. You know, it is like MGTOW is the only answer to this situation. It truly is. Just turn your backs on it and walk away. And walk east, for Christ's sake, go east. truly an awakening experience.
Yeah.
To know whether you accept that women, and particularly teenage girls and young women, sometimes give out pretty mixed signals. They give out mixed messages. They're not even sure what they want at any given time.
I think we're victim blaming.
I don't think
I
that's
think
victim
we're-
blaming.
Come off
So
it,
do you
I
accept?
think we are straying into
Come
a
off
point.
it. Every sinew of your body knows what she just said.
Do you
has a
accept
merit
women
to it.
can sometimes
It's a
give
woman
off
saying it
mixed
too. Come on.
messages? Come on, they
Look,
can.
I mean, sure, but
That's
I'm not.
a non-denial.
But I'm sure,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about assault.
So how are you
Yeah, but
supposed
I
to?
don't think any of us disagree about assault. We're talking about the far greyer line of young teenage fumblings.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they've all stopped having sex, it's because they are actually terrified. And I think it's a great shame if they're terrified into actually having no physical interaction with opposite
Exactly
sex.
that. And then the
How do
other
we get
point,
past
can I
that?
make one other point, which is this whole thing of dredging up allegations that are 10 or 20 years old, I think is absolutely awful.
Why?
Because it's a he said, she
Oh,
said. It's
Isabel,
impossible to
why?
prove. And there are people whose careers are, and their lives are completely
not a-
ruined by allegations that are brought a decade or more after the event. Now, obviously, if the person was a minor at the time of the incident, or the alleged incident,
I
then
can't believe you're
fine.
saying this,
There
that we
be
shouldn't
a
bring up historic assault claims.
I don't
That's
think-
absolutely
I don't
crazy.
think you should be bringing-
Women who
I
would have
don't-
been too afraid to confront it at the time
Why?
because they were too young or too
Right.
powerless
I
to
said
bring it up
about-
in
I
the
said
first
about-
place.
See,
Yeah, so this is ridiculous. Again, historic sexual assault allegations. Like the lady on the left says, it's her word against his, and Ava's claim that they're either too young or too powerless to have said anything at the time is completely nebulous. Like if it actually occurred, I'm talking here sexual assault, right? There would be hospitalisation, a hospital visit, right? You don't just get up and walk away if you're a child and you get sexually assaulted, right? It's a serious fucking crime, but that's not what Ava's talking about. She's talking about being able to 10 years later feel bad about what was at the time not sexual assault, but of course now it's classified as sexual assault. And it's only classified as sexual assault because rape is too strong a term. To you, it could maybe there wasn't any penetration or something, I don't know. But the point is that Ava's position here is totally untenable, and her outrage that women shouldn't have the power to bring what is essentially false allegations against a man whenever they choose, and not to be questioned about it. I mean, that is, if she claims not to be a feminist, but that is feminist 101 position, is that women should have the power to completely destroy a man on a whim, and that's what Ava's here is arguing for. So again, she's mainstream narrative. This is the mainstream narrative that these other people are saying is not right, and Ava's saying it needs to go further. The pendulum needs to swing further. MGTOW is the only answer to all of this. Just have nothing to do with them. Nothing.
I would actually side slightly with Ava here, in the sense I don't have a problem with historic crimes. For example, Harvey Weinstein, they're all
There's
historic.
got to be a cut-off point.
Has there actually? For someone like Harvey,
because
for someone like Harvey
depends on the
Weinstein,
evidence.
should there be a cut-off point, or should the victims, who were all bullied and scared,
I think it
to come
depends
forward,
what the,
right?
Again, from Piers, that is the mainstream narrative, right? That the poor innocent little victims of Harvey Weinstein, bullied and fearful for their futures, etc., 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 blah, 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 blah. My contention is that those girls knew what that casting couch was all about before they even walked in that front door. It was sex for access to the people who can make their careers grow, or the assumption here is that these women are just innocent, friendly little creatures, little fluffy things, just floating at the whim of the ocean currents, or the floating through the air at the whim of the air currents, and they have really got no agency or ability to make any sort of decision whatsoever. It's just they get taken advantage of by the vicious men, etc., etc., etc. When it is just like the whole sorry saga is just totally ridiculously portrayed in all of this media. Male perpetrator, female victim. Again, that is the narrative, and that narrative will continue forever and ever in the West because it sells. It sells. People want that to be true, and you're a perpetrator just because of what's hanging between your legs. Right? It's as simple as that. Now, MGTOW's the answer.
I think it depends on the severity of the allegation. Obviously, if it's something,
Right.
it's a rape case or something. But if it is a, he put his
All right,
hands on my knee.
You're talking about the journalist movement.
I'm
the
basically-
journalists that bravely came forward and told about how cabinet ministers had touched them inappropriately on the knee, which was horrendous.
I'm not
Yes.
bothered about touching on a knee. I mean, 20 years later?
Yes,
that
but
someone should be dragged
exposed
through the courts
entire
for that.
sexual harassment culture that is in Westminster and is still really pervasive at the moment.
Well, the good thing is we've all reached complete agreement after 5 years of the MeToo movement. But it's interesting, isn't it? So we've got lots of different views here. It is complicated, I think. And I would argue, but maybe a man shouldn't argue this at all, but I would argue the pendulum may have swung a little too far. You don't think it swung far enough. Mm-hmm. You probably are on my side. You probably are too. But I'm not sure we should really be taking sides either. It's a complex minefield. And I think that when you start using phrases like that, you should be terrified. Nobody should be terrified on any side of this, I don't think. Would
Not
be where
unless
I'd
they
pull you
have
up
criminal intent. That's
but good debate. Thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate it.